Jim, thank you for coming. What's your favorite trinket or toy or thing about our new studio? What do you like?
I was really impressed by the green. For some reason, it's green. You have a crowbar that's clearly supposed to be a Half-Life thing.
Yeah.
But it's colored green and etched on it. It says, "What would Gordon do?"
Just like in Half-Life 2.
Right, like as Barney manufactured for Gordon's return as a Valentine's Day gift.
That was very thoughtful of him.
Yeah, I don't. I think maybe it's green because it might have been the Xbox version or something. I have absolutely no idea, but I much prefer this version that you've concocted. That it's some sort of.
I'm sure there's a mod out there to fix it for you.
A mod to fix Half-Life so that
fix Half-Life's crowbar color,
so that or a mod that to make Barney in love with Gordon.
Oh, it's all subtext.
Okay,
it's all just like you can tell just by looking at this crowbar.
Those like little wry looks he gives you in Dr. Kleiner's lab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still waiting for the Barney visual novel, the Dream Daddy of Half-Life.
Do you think? We could go to YouPorn right now and Google it and look it up. Do you think there's Half-Life 2? I mean, Gary's mods, I think Gary's mod's been there for a while.
I think it's all been overshadowed by the Candy Crush porn by now.
There's a Candy Crush porn?
Well, we're talking about like mainstream, like no one cares about the niche stuff anymore. Like it's all like Fortnite porn,
Clash of Clans.
Oh yeah, that one has a yelling guy on the icon, so like it writes itself.
Candy Crush is hard to pornify. There's no anthropomorphized figures in it. It's just candy.
Dota
right?
porn?
There must be.
There has to be Dota porn.
Yeah.
I want that less than anything else in the world.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Noclip podcast, the first podcast in the world that's ever been made. No, it's the first podcast from our studio here in Emeryville, California. No longer broadcast from my bedroom in Oakland or edited randomly around the world. We're here. We're sitting on this table, which I think my cat might have pissed on. But we'll table that for a second because we're also delighted to be joined by our first ever live guest, Mr. Jim Crawford, sandwich imagineer for Twinbeard, creator of Frog Fractions. How are you doing, my friend?
I just want to point out my married name. I'm married now. They changed their name to Stormdancer.
You literally changed?
That's actually my legal last name now.
Your name is Jim Stormdancer.
Technically, it's James Stormdancer, but I go by Jim.
Oh my God!
Are you a World of Warcraft quest giver?
I mean, do you see the exclamation point?
That's the only reason I asked.
Have you killed Hogger? Oh my God, that's incredible. Can I ask? This sounds like a very ignorant question. Why?
So we had been joking about. Because neither of us wanted to take the other one's dad's name,
right? Yeah,
and we'd been joking about basically since we started dating, like what are some hilarious last names to take, and that was the one that we liked best. I think it started out as a play on Skywalker.
Okay, yeah. Do you have a new family tree of other people who are called Stormdancer around the world?
Voidburster. Sorry, what? No, there's us, and then there's our kid Winston.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's also a very good name.
It's a fantastic name. You've also completely guaranteed that your child will get their Gmail account and everything else for the rest of time.
And Ancestry.com is going to have a real interesting time starting to categorize the Stormdancer clan.
Yeah, this is actually like I didn't think about this until after we changed the name, but a significant downside of my name is that now if you look for me on like Spokeo, you only find my address.
Right.
It used to be Jim Crawford. There are thousands of those. So like I've definitely started like watching who I say mean things about on the internet.
Right.
Because if their fan base comes after me, now they can actually find me.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen.
No.
I've had thousands of PewDiePie fans come after me and find Chappelle Show quotes from 10 years ago. I think it didn't age too well.
You found this solution, though, to internet anonymity creating toxicity, which is if everyone had incredibly unique names, then everyone would be accountable for all of their behavior.
Right.
If everyone was a Stormdancer.
So you're saying we should just get people to post online with their social security numbers and then hold witch trials for them, whatever.
The problem is that there are so many people named PewDiePie.
So true.
It's become the new Dave. It's basically Dave in Sweden, I think. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Yeah.
You, I think, are maybe the first person we ever interviewed in the East Bay anyway. Like when we did our documentary on mystery and we did our videos on Frog Fractions 1. And
yeah, that was fun. So it's a nice parallel for me to break in the new studio for you guys. Looking around the studio, I can definitely tell that this is the first podcast you've recorded here.
What makes you say that? I don't understand.
Is it the cardboard boxes? Is it the slight hum that might be on the playback of this podcast because we maybe have a little bit of ground going on here?
You should link in the show notes. You should link to a tutorial for how to noise reduce that out using Audacity, so people can just do that on their own copies of the MP3.
It's an interactive podcast.
That's right.
Exactly. It's like patch notes, except their actual notes are how to patch it.
Right.
Not.
Here's the solder point.
I was saying earlier, it's funny how I was looking up tutorials for like how to do some of this fixing, what to buy for this, and not just the audio equipment, but also like video mixers and stuff like that. And it seems like the main like market for this stuff is places of worship, is like churches. Like I didn't realize there was such a multimedia thing going on at churches. Have you ever been at a church that had like video screens and podcasts going on?
I've not seen video screens. I went for a school assignment. I double majored in film and religion, and so I had to go to a couple church services as well as other faith services. And there was always a PA, and there was always a dude on a mixer. So I think that's the 2019 version of the organist. Is just the guy on the knobs.
Right.
I've never been to a cool church service, but I've definitely walked past them and they're like, that music's that's a banger.
Right.
I could listen to that.
So much low end on the organ.
Right, yeah. Totally. Gotta get bums on seats, man. Let's talk a little bit about the documentary we just put out before we sort of chat about the video games we're playing and what we're up to. We just put a documentary out on the ESRB on how they sort of like rate games and do all their business. We also, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you're wondering where we were last week. That was the first of our patron exclusive episodes. So if you're a patron over at patreon.com/Noclip, you can listen to us confusingly talk about Death Stranding for the best part of an hour and 20 minutes, I think. It feels like there's no end of commentary on Death Stranding on the internet right now, but if you want our hottest takes on our Norman Reedus Mailman Simulator, you can go check that out. But our doc on ESRB is up now on the Noclip YouTube channel. It's been fun getting it out. I'm delighted to have it out. I feel like we've been trying to organize that one for the best part of a year, trying to convince them to let us do it, and then trying to create a video that's explaining something that is kind of, I don't know, not the most sexy thing in the world, but of relative interest. I'm happy to have it out. I want to ask you, Jim, though, have you ever actually, because you recently put out the physical edition, the limited run version of Glitter Mitten Grove,
right?
AKA, well, we'll let people figure it out for themselves if they haven't already. Did you have to go through ESRB certification for that?
No, we put a fake ESRB notice on the box as a joke. I believe the warnings were comic mischief, tragic mischief, and eldritch mischief.
Did you clear that with anyone?
Well, I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure we didn't actually use the letters ESRB.
Okay. So then it's fine.
Yeah.
It's parody, right?
Right.
Everything's fine under parody law.
Did it have a letter rating, like not T for teen, but something in lieu of that?
Yes, but I don't remember what the joke was there.
No worries.
We met the guy and interviewed the gentleman who does the voice for like rated M for mature. So we got him to do rated N for Noclip, but literally getting the like thumbs up to use that in the we don't do clearance with anyone. Like we don't when we film stuff.
The tone of his voice is a trademark.
I think it was maybe they just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any like legal problem with like us using, like it had to be parody or whatever. So I think ultimately it got passed around to a couple of lawyers and they were like, yeah, it's fine.
It's not funny enough to be parody. I'm sorry.
That's good. That's a good point. It was the type of joke you come up with at the end of a second day of interviews where you're very tired. But yeah, you can go check it out if you want to. It's on the youtube.com/noclipvideo. We had some feedback on the loot box thing, which I'm not surprised about necessarily. There's sort of are you into the conversation about the, well, not into, but have you watched the online discourse about loot boxes and how the ESA and the ESRB sort of fit into that over the past year or so?
I've been kind of idly keeping track of that stuff.
We had I guess there was a sort of maybe last year there was a a couple of YouTubers and people were talking about how the ESRB could maybe litigate against loot boxes as a sort of backdoor to getting some sort of regulation put in place.
Right.
The sort of reality of that is that they enforce regulation, they don't write it. So that's kind of an issue for the ESA, or people can lobby the government and get them to to make the ESA do something about it. And the ESA are bringing in some sort of, I think they're not retrofitting it, but any game coming forward is going to have like drop rates are going to have to be shown, but like that's so piecemeal it doesn't really fix any problems. So we had a little bit of a backlash from that community that thinks the ESRB is responsible for that sort of stuff. And we did ask them the question. We asked them the question maybe 4 or 5 different ways, and there's like a 5-minute section in the video that's sort of about that, but I didn't really want to spend any more time on that because it's not really a thing for them, even if people think it is. Yeah, so it was a little bit of a...
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as game designers are deliberately tickling the same things that cause gambling addiction, I think there's going to be a problem.
Which is a kind of, I mean, that's loot box is only one like side of that. I feel like that, just like most games seem to have some sort of like Skinner box aspect to them, right?
I agree. I think the difference is that in the case of loot boxes, there's a monetary incentive to really drill down on exactly what makes people tick.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Like I've seen the argument, and I think it's a decent one, that the question block in Super Mario Brothers is also a loot box.
Right. It tickles the same part of your brain or whatever. Or I think when Call of Duty Modern Warfare, kind of COD 4's multiplayer came out, that sort of also taught that, a lot of designers that, we can create these like, breadcrumb trails that can get players to keep, give that Skinner box feeling of constantly rewarding folks for putting time in. And that's kind of what, I feel like that's what kind of games like Destiny have ended up as, or Anthem. And
I think maybe the discourse has to be around like the spectrum of how much you're ruining people's lives. Like if you're addicted to Mario Brothers loot boxes, like question boxes, it's probably not going to affect you that much. But you get to World of Warcraft, that really did like destroy a lot of people's careers, and people dropped out of school, that sort of thing. And that wasn't even with them getting more money if you spent if you drop out of school, like it's...
Blizzard didn't get any more money if you did 4 Onyxia runs every week.
Right, they were only getting the $15 a month from you.
Yeah,
there is something weird to be said about the way that money ties into loot boxes and stuff. Because despite the fact that World of Warcraft doesn't like, there are people who were selling items and selling gold and things like that. But for most people, that addictive cycle wasn't because they were like, I'm going to get this hammer and sell it for $100.
Right.
It was the idea that it had value in game, like in the currency, in the diegesis of the game. It had value, right? But it's interesting how that pushes up against sort of that dividing line between like the monetary value of actual things you're getting in loot boxes,
right.
Whether you're getting like a mask that you can only either win by gambling or pay for. It becomes sort of like this even if it's purely cosmetic and has no bearing on gameplay, it starts to take on real world value or something. Yeah. And then I think in something like World of Warcraft, where it's like it is sort of this microcosmic reality, it takes on value that's maybe not monetary, but it's like it's more permanent. Whereas like getting a Tanuki suit in Mario it's so flash in the pan. It's interesting how that pushes up against like real world value or something, and I think that ties into the addictive level of it.
As a designer, Jim, I feel like the sort of one of the base things that you're trying to accomplish is getting people to keep playing your game.
That's actually very much not true for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually kind of feel gross about the idea that someone might play one of my games forever. Like that they are so addicted to this activity that like it's just going to take up space for the rest of their life. And I have made design decisions that to avoid that.
Right.
But also like the kinds of games I make don't really lend themselves to that anyway. Like I tend to kind of make the kind of games that you play for an hour and then are done with, and maybe you think fondly on the experience, but then there's really you don't get that much out of playing it again.
Is that reflected in the games you play as well? Like, do you tend to go for those unique experiences rather than these long form, one game?
I tend to value the unique experiences more, but also like, because I I'm also of the kind of the mindset that kind of demands that sort of entertainment constantly. I do tend to fall back on the forever games, and so maybe I'm kind of a hypocrite for denigrating them. But I do play a lot. Like I play a lot of Pokemon Go and have forever.
Yeah, let's all put our cards on the table. What are our like forever games? What have we been playing pretty much on and off for the past couple of years?
I don't know if I have one.
Oh, really?
I feel like I'm the type of person who goes through phases where I bought the Outer Worlds on Friday and I was totally like I don't know if I'll ever play it again.
But you completed it.
I completed it. And I like went back and sort of like save scummed my way through a few different endings and iterations of the story and stuff just to kind of like feel it out. But I don't know. I put 30 hours into it over the weekend, and like I think that's just my playstyle. I don't know if I have perpetual ones.
Right. Yeah, I mean yourself. It's like Pokemon Go. Any other ones? Did you ever get into the MMO stuff?
Did
you have your WoW time?
I had my WoW time, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, amen. A great disaster. I loved every minute of it, and then suffered greatly afterwards.
And I have never played an MMO since then because I know it would be another disaster. Off the top of my head, like I've been playing the New York Times crossword.
Okay, yeah.
Which is pretty, and some of those have like I have design issues with some of those puzzles, but like for the most part they're pretty good. Come out every day,
right? But they have an ending.
They do have an ending. Each one has an ending, and but even that game like that has like the New York Times crossword puzzle app has like achievements and streaks. Like if you finish
is that like boxes?
It's like that. If you finish a puzzle without getting a clue from the you can go and Google it and it won't know. Okay, but if you can ask it for a hint. And if you don't ask for hints or whatever, it'll give you a gold puzzle instead of a blue one when you complete it. And then it also keeps track of like how many days in a row you've done.
Right. That's difficult because that's like a Pandora's box. Like you can't uncork that one. Like you have the minute you take that tip, you're not going to get the gold. Yeah. Like that's it.
Yep.
So then do you tend to, if you go get one tip, you get like 10 tips?
Oh yeah, okay. You're in for a penny, in for a pound at that point.
Right. That's awesome. I think mine is probably, it used to be like FIFA. Like I'd play a game of FIFA, and weirdly enough, it's been replaced by Rocket League, which is kind of ostensibly the same experience, where you're just playing a game of soccer, but it's shorter and way more intense. FIFA's the game I play on my Switch when there's turbulence in the plane and I don't like it, to like zone out. And Rocket League is the game I play to like, I don't know, get angry at strangers and try and win the game and then calm down afterwards.
I think Dota, and now that you're saying that description of your cycle, Dota is like the pack of cigarettes I keep in the back of my desk drawer for like when I've had a hard day, and I'm like, it's been a year, but whatever. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about that, like a singular iteration of like a sports game or like some competitive shooter or Dota or something that just makes it like a little hour of bite-size frustration.
God, we all need them. Let us know what yours are. Podcast at noclip.video. We'll chat about them next week. Let's move on to the games you're playing, Jim. I'm interested in the stuff you've been playing recently, because it sounds like first of all, congratulations on the birth of your child.
Thank you.
I know it can be, I had a kid around the same time, and I know it can be difficult to fit games in, and sometimes there's a lot of time for games, and then there's no time for games, and it's kind of all over.
This part of my raising a child is long in the past, but for the first 6 weeks, you actually get a bunch of gaming time.
Totally,
it's actually kind of nice.
Yes, I played Bloodborne nonstop for 6 weeks, and then,
there it is.
Yeah, I got the tattoo just to remember that whole moment. What did you play during that initial, like the fourth trimester, as they call it?
I think I was playing a lot of Prey.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. Like the
2017 Prey. Yeah.
What did you make of it?
I really like Prey. Like so when I played Deus Ex like around 2000 when it was released.
Okay.
And I loved it. Like many people my age. And then when Deus Ex 2 Invisible War came out, that kind of game kind of fell out of favor for a while.
Right.
And so I kind of lost, like I lost track of how much I liked those games.
Like the emergent sim or whatever.
Immersive is what they say. And when Deus Ex Human Revolution came out and Dishonored came out, and I played them, and I was like, oh, they're pretty fun now, but I don't I didn't love them.
Right.
But I attributed that to how like when you get older, you just like things less. You know, you just like whatever gland in your head produces like you can like things chemical. There's less of that chemical in your brain.
Right. The colors are all a little bit less saturated.
And so I was just like, it's probably as good as Deus Ex, and I'll play the next one too. That's fine.
But they were very different versions of that game, right?
They were.
Yeah.
And then Prey came out and hit me like a fucking express train. Like, this is the love that I had for Deus Ex, and like, I kind of hadn't realized I could still love things that much.
Right.
You know, it's kind of amazing. I was really, really impressed by it.
That's great. So you just like poured hours and hours and hours into that.
Yeah.
So how did you do that? Did you do multiple runs, or did you just spec up in all the different ways, or?
I did do multiple runs, but I didn't actually. So when I say I loved it, I didn't actually even finish the second run. I did a I forget what you call the upgrades in that game. The things you stab into your eye. I did all like human eye stabs, and then I started to run
the achievement for all eye stabs complete.
And then I did a run with all the Typhon eye stabs, but I didn't finish that one. So like. How much could I possibly have loved it if I didn't replay it? I think we'd be really interested in doing something around the arcane stuff. People keep asking as well to do dives into the design. I mean, those games are just like very rich veins for talking about game design, especially for people who don't know game design, because so much of the game design is on the surface or something, or gamers can sort of see it in front of them. They can sort of see the strings a little bit. Have you ever played much of the arcane stuff, like Dishonored? Or
I played a little bit of Dishonored, and I dabbled in Prey a little bit. I like all of that stuff. I think I haven't sat down maybe with the right mindset or something that it caught me, or maybe haven't given it enough time.
They are the type of games you kind of need to be like, all right, I'm playing this for a week.
Do you know if Sean Elliott still works at Arcane?
Oh, I actually don't know.
That's something that I think about a lot. Like, so I loved him as a podcaster.
Yes, fantastic.
And then when he moved into games, like he did a little bit of that stuff at
Did he work on BioShock 2?
He worked on BioShock Infinite, and I'm trying to remember the name of the company that made that, Irrational.
Oh, yeah.
But after that, like he transitioned from like a producer into a full-time level designer.
Oh, okay.
And stopped doing the podcast. And like the podcast voice, like his like not just his like tone of voice, but like the kind of things that he would talk about and be interested in is what I miss from his creative output.
Yeah.
And like I played Prey, and I recognized which level was his in Prey even.
You're kidding, really?
Well, you can tell because he put like all the people that he knows and would talk about in the podcast, he put them in as characters in the game in his level specifically. But like his sense of humor does not come across in that level, you know?
Yeah.
And so like this is one of the things like I feel like it's almost inevitable that I am soon going to have to stop making video games. Like, just because, like, I'm not making enough money at it to justify it when I'm, like, trying to support a family.
Right.
And so probably I'm going to, you know, get a tech job. And one of the things that makes me saddest about that is just that my creative voice is going to vanish into this enormous corporation. And even if I'm, you know, in a creative, like, doing creative things in that corporation, I'm probably doing them as part of a 100-person team or whatever. And what that means is that like all the people who are enjoying my voice currently are not going to get it anymore. That's very sad to me.
And that's reflected in you seeing his work, but this sort of diluted
and that
version.
Was the reason I brought it up was that I was kind of hoping you would talk to him specifically and he would be in the documentary.
Right. All right. I'm making a note. For Jim, it's going on my little notepad here.
Appreciate that.
I mean, is that just the reality of working in the Bay Area? The reality of being a working
living in
dad?
The Bay Area is probably a big part of it. But also just like it's super hard to make a living making games, especially when you don't really have any business sense like I do. Like I've to some extent I've turned that into a strength where like the premise of my Kickstarter was that I'm never going to promote this game. And part of that was me being like, I don't want to promote anything. I just want to make things and put them out there. And, but that also the audacity of like promising to never never promote a thing was itself effective promotion.
Yes.
And so, like, I've kind of, like, leaned into that.
Counter promotion.
Right. But it's also...
You Streisand affected yourself or something.
But also, like, if I had released the sequel as Frog Fractions 2, I bet it would have sold 5 times as many copies.
But that's like... But it wouldn't have been as beautiful.
Oh, I agreed. And there's no way I could have done it that way.
Right.
You know?
So I guess, like, what pays the bills now then? Like, what do you work on? Even if you can't talk about specific projects, like what is it like being an independent developer? If you're not working on your own stuff.
I don't think I can talk even about that right
really?
now. Yeah.
Okay. do most people in your position kind of work on their own games and then also do work for hire? Is that just kind of how it works?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's almost certainly true. Like, there are always going to be a few people who hit it big and make millions of dollars, but for the most part, and this is true with almost any art form, either you have like a supportive spouse,
right,
or you're still living with your parents, or you're living off your parents' money, even if you're living in your own place, or you have a lucrative side gig. And that this is true in almost every artistic field I can think of, because you just can't make a living doing art anymore.
Yeah,
if you ever could.
Did you ever see those like promotional, or not promotional, the inspirational tweets of like, Steve Wozniak started in his parents' garage, and it's meant to evoke this sort of like grassroots kind of doing it for yourself, but like the reality being that he could use his parents' garage to do the job. It was, you had a support structure, and so many of the people we've interviewed over the years, especially indie folks, have had like maybe a spouse who's a lawyer or were able to, like Supergiant, right? Like we talked to them, they used Amir's father's place, and Greg talked about how like he was lucky that he had a spouse that supported him, and they didn't have to pay rent, and that's in for the company, and all this sort of stuff. Like and like I had an epiphany recently where I realized that the reason that all 90s rappers used to be drug dealers is that those were the people who could afford the music production equipment.
And it gave them something badass to rap about.
Well, that too.
It didn't hurt. Jim, is there a world in which you find like a middle ground where you can keep doing independent development exclusively, or more exclusively, like have that be the lion's share of your work, and sort of like reconfigure the way you're promoting your work? Or is that such a total compromise of your vision?
I don't know. It's something that's worth thinking about, and I would love to continue to do creative work. Like, and part of the problem is that in order to sell a video game, you have to kind of spend 3 years full-time work on it,
right?
Or it's just not going to be polished enough to get anybody's attention.
Is that like, is there a creep in that? Like, is that bar constantly getting higher? Because it seems like
I think so.
These days, like God, every indie game just has the most incredible art now.
Yeah. Whereas if you look at like in 2010, you could make a Flash game in a weekend and get on the front page of Kotaku.
Right. Yeah.
And you wouldn't make any money from it, but it would be, people would have eyes on it. And like in 2012, I was able to, I was working part-time, and I made Frog Fractions in my spare time.
Right.
And that took about a year, but like a year of like part-time work. And it got a bunch of attention. And part of that was even like the audacity of that project, where like I'm explicitly hiding the good part from you. Right. Like the fact that that was a success, even in that atmosphere, even in that era, is ridiculous.
Right.
And it's completely hopeless now. And the only reason that I can still do this sort of thing, even to the extent that I can, is that I built up that reputation from back when it was possible to get people's attention that way.
Do you think it's even harder now?
I think it is, yeah.
Just because there's more people developing?
There are so many more. Like, you see developers complaining about shovelware on Steam.
Right.
But even if that wasn't a problem, there are so many incredible games on Steam coming out every week.
Right.
There are way more people making games than the public hasn't, like indie games specifically, than the public has an appetite for.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been, as I started learning Unity, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, maybe like a week and a half ago. And one of the things that's been most shocking to me in music and Unity have become sort of like my side entertainment hobbies. Mm-hmm. And in both of them, it seems like there's this whole world of, for music, there's services like Splice that have sample packs where you can download chunks of, like you could just download a bass line for like a real slapping beat and just like make your drums. And then that's like, that is an original piece of music that you made in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of your audience, because you kind of, there's a curtain. Right. And in the same way, the Unity asset store has like I just started learning Unity and I could slap together someone else's code with someone else's assets and have like a totally functioning first-person shooter engine. And it might not be, top of the line or anything, but that's like the bar. You were saying there's so many things out there, and it seems like if you have an idea, it's getting easier and easier to just kind of like actualize it without learning all the technical back end of it or something. Yeah,
which is incredible, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I think one of the things, it's just super important for humans to be able to make art,
right?
To be able to make the art they care about, and it's not so important that we be able to sell it.
Yeah. Is it important to find an audience for it?
It is for a lot of people, and that's something that I that's kind of something I kind of struggle with. Like when I was in my teens and 20s, I made, fuck off weirdo music for like 10 years. And then as I was edging up on 30, I was like, shouldn't I be making good music by now? Shouldn't I be finding an audience? And this was like, despite the fact that some of that fuck off weirdo music I thought was genuinely very good. And also, like, why should troll outsider art be the purview of teenagers?
Right.
Why shouldn't I be able to just make that my whole life? And so, and then like Frog Fractions was a hit, and I've been totally ruined for making art for no audience.
Oh, really?
Like I just cannot mentally justify, and this is I think a major failing of mine in terms of like my own happiness. I cannot justify doing almost anything creative that is not a game, is not a video game.
Is that because of the audience, or is that because of your responsibilities at home?
No. I mean, there's that too, but no. I mean, just like in terms of like feeling like I am putting value into the world,
right?
Especially with the Frog Fractions 2 project, that game was so broad in terms of what it could be that literally any creative output I had could find a place in that game.
Right.
And so I couldn't justify doing anything that wasn't that game.
Of course, yeah, because it would fit in.
Yeah.
You could make a square peg and then it would fit in no matter what.
But I do think that like there have to be artists out there that are just making stuff and enjoying it and never putting it out there, and good on them. Or just showing it to their friends, and that's enough. Like you could cook dinner for your family, and that counts, know.
But I wonder if games are in a specifically difficult avenue for that, because
right, and this is what I wanted to get back to, because it takes 3 years to make a competitive game.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do as a hobby.
Totally.
Like I made Frog Fractions in my spare time because I was single.
Right.
Like being married with a kid, it is ludicrous to think that I might I might be able to have such a life-consuming hobby.
Yeah. Whereas if you were, part of the reason I think, I don't know, warmed to video editing so much was previous to that I worked as a web developer.
Yeah.
And those projects were nowhere near as long as a piece of software like a video game, but they were long. They were 3 to 4 month projects. Yeah. Whereas videos can be, as long as a month maybe in our case sometimes in terms of post-production, or as short as, Jeremy just edited a 20-minute video in the space of 3 hours today.
Yeah.
And you'll get, it mightn't be that same massive, dopamine hit or whatever of satisfaction or artistic, value, but it's a drip and it helps. Whereas games is like, it's so all or nothing. And then no wonder like so many of the people who release their games afterwards have this like postpartum issue as well.
Right. And then there's also like if you're scared of not being able to stand up to your previous work,
right? Oh my God!
Then like there's a very strong impulse to like, no, let's make the development cycle as long as possible.
Yeah.
So I don't have to fail as often.
And if you do fail, then then it's, you know, if it was a 3-year cycle, then it's 6 years before you feel better about it.
Yeah.
Like, whereas like we fuck up all the time, and there's videos we put out, and I'm like, we should, you know, could have done better there, could have put more time into that. But like, hey, you know what? The next one's just around the corner. Yeah. Whereas gamers, you know, game designers don't have that.
Yeah, but game development as a hobby, like you can make a jam game in a weekend and feel satisfied with it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's something that I keep forgetting. And I would love. I made a lot of jam games in like 2012, 2013, and I miss it. You know,
I remember you shared me a bunch of stuff when we were doing the Half-Life documentary, because you worked on a kind of a fun jam game around that as well.
Yeah.
It was all like super fun, interesting stuff.
A little a clip from that game ended up in the documentary.
Yes.
That was really neat.
Yeah, that was a fun game
like
to play.
And like all the people who worked with me on it were very happy about that. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah,
with us.
Game jams are really cool because they represent this, like you were saying, that you work on this project so long and the audience has become this really important part of that for you. Yeah. And I think, for like, speaking from my own experience as someone who does creative stuff, I think after you spend long enough on any sort of creative outlet, it's having just like you lose track of what it is, kind of like you have your internal version of what this edit is or what this thing you're writing is, but then showing it to someone else is almost like it's like proof that you're not totally insane.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, I've been working on this thing, you have no idea what it is, just take a look at it, and like, am I making a video game at this point? Like, am I still painting on the canvas? Like, I think the audience has this level of, I don't know, like, I wish I was secure enough to just create art in a cabinet and then burn it and just like live by myself.
Right.
But I think having an audience just like gives you realize that, you know, you're working on something that like other people recognize as valid, or like you're decent at what you do.
Well, there's a big difference between enjoying the process of making something and enjoying people enjoying your work. And if what you like is the process, then you can just do that forever and never have to show it to anybody. But I think so many successful artists don't actually enjoy the process. They're just driven. Yeah. And they're driven by like the compulsive need to accomplish things and impress people. And they're kind of stuck in a endless cycle there, because if you have a successful thing, it really only makes you happy for a couple of months. Right. And then you need to get another hit again.
Totally.
And this is something I just tweeted about today. So I'm thinking it's right there in my mind. I firmly believe like the actual solution to, if you have that problem, is to not to change who you are, but to change how you feel about yourself.
Right. In what way?
Like if you, like, I feel like so many artists are driven by like, I am a failure. I am like self-loathing, you know, the need to impress, like probably like as a kid, like people thought, people were saying like, you're never going to succeed or whatever, or like their parents weren't proud of them and they want their dad to be proud of them. And it really is so much more effective to be able, if you are able to do it. And I think you know, it takes a lot of like therapy and meditation and that sort of thing to get to this point. But like, if you are able to just flip the switch where like you're okay with just being a normal person and not being a great person necessarily, that's much healthier.
That really rings true with me. I definitely felt like I had a chip on my shoulder and was trying to prove to, I don't know who the fuck, like the world, that I was worth something. And I feel like I only lost that when we started Noclip, which is awful, because it means that like this negative like path that I put myself down, I ended up like succeeding at it, which is like terrible. Like that's, well, I think it's so self involved, or it's like it's not advice I would give to anyone at all.
Well, I think what actually happened there was you realized that having success wasn't actually making you happier. Yeah. And that's the trick. Like, all the successful artists are miserable.
Totally, yeah.
That's not literally true, but like so many of them are, and because they're not even more successful.
Right. And I think there are elements of it that are really, like, being validated as an artist is super important. The financial element of it can definitely help. You know, it's like the money doesn't make you happy, but like money can fucking make you not sad. Yeah. Like money has the ability to not make you fucking miserable.
Yeah, you need a certain amount of money even have the possibility of being happy.
Totally. Exactly. But it doesn't guarantee it, right? But the idea that it's, you know, and that's why I don't know. So when I see a lot of like music artists or something that have that level of fame, you're like, of course you're miserable, because like, what the fuck do you do now? If you don't get off that train, like, then what's the next thing? Like, it's just ego building forever. But if you reach the top of your career, what are you going to do next?
It's kind of like the idea that I've heard it said about writing before, that if you want to sit down to write and you're trying to write something good, you'll instantly freeze in your tracks, because your idea of good writing is better than anything you can write.
Yes.
And so the only way to create things is just to just make some shit. If you're bad at painting, just paint something bad. And that critiquing is sort of the skill where you refine yourself, because everyone knows what a bad painting looks like, whether you painted it or not. So paint something bad and then look at it and be like, why is this bad? And that's kind of how you get better. But you can't make something good, because everything good in your mind is just better than what you're capable of.
Yeah.
I saw a quote. I can't remember the writer, but I don't think I could pronounce the writer's name even if I could, where they were saying that their writing process is first they take copious notes about what they're going to write about, and then they skip over writing, and now they're in the editing phase where they edit the notes into a publishable material.
Funny.
Oh, wow.
So they never have to write it all. In their own heads.
That's clever.
That's a cognitive like leapfrog that's going on. God, I do feel like editing. I feel like the reason the way I tackle a lot of edits is very technical. Where I mean, there's a technical element to it, because you're basically like you're getting the wheat from the chaff at the start. You're just cutting out the excess, and then you're plotting it together. And at a certain point, you decide, okay, I'm in the artistic part of the edit now, and then it all slows down, where you're like adding music and trying to get tone and all this. Whereas like I feel like some people maybe who are more confident at it will come in at the start and be like, here's my canvas, and I will put everything where it needs to be, and I'll be part of it. But to me, it's like crippling. Like I need it to be very perfunctory and like analytical and scientific at the start, because so much of editing, I feel like, is like paping over cracks, like putting B-roll over things you fucked up, or fixing voices or bad questions, or fixing their answer because it's bad. It just feels like a lot of it is.
You have to get it to acceptable first.
Exactly. And then add to it if you want to or not. But it's a crazy process. So what do you think? I'm depressed to hear this, Jim Stormdancer.
Oh, wait, about what?
About the idea that you might have to
yeah.
Maybe Frog Fractions 3 will be like in some Facebook app or something that you end up working at.
I can't talk about that. It does make me sad, but also like just thinking about my own personal life.
Right.
One of the things so when I had a day job, one of the things I noticed as I was getting older, like into my late 20s, was that life kind of felt like it was passing me by. Like I felt like time was kind of accelerating. Like every day, every week was like shorter than the last week. And projecting into the future, like I would be 90 and it would just all feel like an eye blink.
Right.
Like, oh shit, where did my life go? And then when I got laid off from my job, and I made.
Can you say what that job was?
I was a back-end programmer at a web design company.
Cool.
And I started making art that caught on, and then I started like getting paid to do that, and like having to hustle for like how was I gonna make a living from this thing. And my life got to the point where like I don't know what's gonna happen today. I don't know what's gonna happen next week.
Right.
To the point where like, and it felt like an adventure. It felt like much more vibrant, and I have not felt the feeling of acceleration that like death is hurtling at me since then.
Okay.
And it's kind of a miracle. Like I feel like it's a reprieve from the suffocating approaching death that like was my main like mood in my late 20s.
So are you worried that if you went back into like a normal job like that, then it would happen again? Or?
No.
Okay.
Because having a 1-year-old is also an adventure. It's also like it does all that same stuff.
Yeah.
Of like, I don't know what I'm going to fucking have to deal with today or next week. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm actually like mentally just like entirely in my own head for my own mental well-being. I'm entirely fine with getting a day job.
Yeah.
It sucks for everybody else though.
It sucks for everyone else who's not going to be able to play a bunch of your games if you're not putting them out.
Well, exactly.
There. Yeah. I'm in the same spot. I feel like we talk a lot about creative constraints, myself and Jeremy, about how like sometimes if actually, this is, I think, a question for you as well about Frog Fractions too, where like we talk about how sometimes if you have a really broad mandate for a project, it can be impossible because it could be anything, and trying to figure out what it should be is like the problem.
Yeah.
And having like constraints, like time constraints or short amount of interviewees, or we can't use B-roll of this game or any of that sort of stuff. It kind of makes it more vibrant and exciting because you have to like problem solve the thing. And I feel like having a kid is that as well, because you don't know like what's going to happen tomorrow, like if they're sick, or if you have to go pick up a thing, or they're just acting weirder than ever before, or there's and also they keep changing.
Well, right, like
the child is different every week.
That's my understanding, is that like it's just going to keep it stays hard, but it's hard in different ways every time, and that's super exciting to me.
You get good at this version of the kid. Like you figure out this kid, and then they patch the kid.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, what?
Oh, the meta's all changed now.
No, it's like, yeah, exactly.
The meta, yeah.
You gotta change heroes, yeah.
I was thinking that like that sort of like surfing on the edge of novelty, like finding that sweet spot between like being homeless and being like, oh my god, my life is total chaos. Like that's not adventure, that's hell.
Well, right.
Yeah. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is like, oh cool, I'm making $1 million a year at a job I hate.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of finding that middle of the dial where life is constantly handing you novelty, because in a sense I feel like I have been most driven to creativity outside of work when I've had jobs that I didn't like or that didn't creatively fulfill me.
And he started working on a game last week. I should be worried.
That's just because I like video games. But it's like this weird thing where you're like having a super broad art project like that. Like you're inserting novelty into your life to create like artificial wells of novelty, where like you come home from something very predictable and all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, I'm back on the canvas, and like I don't know what the next brushstroke is. And so in a way I wonder if there's an existential link between the drive to create as sort of like a self-validation thing, or like to create fulfillment, and that drive to like find the middle ground between total security and total chaos. You know what I mean?
To like destroy yourself a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. For the sake of like creating excitement and fulfillment, because I think fulfillment comes from facing challenges and coming outside of your comfort zone.
It's really weird. What you're talking about actually, I think feeds, this is probably a little bit off topic, but it feeds a little bit into my sort of like latent alcoholism. Like I think that's the reason that there are like times in my life where I drink, because I'm just bored and I need to like insert some sort of drama. And even like being, especially in my 20s, even being like hungover was a form of like spice in my life. You know what I mean? Like, and
it's a scene in the movie.
You try hitting your thumb with a hammer.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I wonder if it's all part. It's an element of that where like it's not really like that sort of. Maybe it is to some people. It's that need to feel like you're alive, but like in a less dramatic way, it's just a need to feel like entertained by life. Or to feel like I don't know, if you're rubbing up against the edges, then you know you're living. Whereas if you're just like smoothly going down the path, even if it's a path that seems like it's pretty good, it's like it has a numbing effect or something like that. Yeah,
there needs to be that friction, or like you need to insert this when your life doesn't have those ups and downs. You need to like create the sine wave because things are too flat.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is why boredom exists.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the idea that like you could be doing something more interesting right now, and go do it.
Yeah.
Speaking of boredom, do you have any interest in playing Death Stranding?
I do. I'm kind of frustrated because I'm not going to have a chance to play this for a while, and I wanted to go into it knowing nothing, and yet I'm compulsively reading about it.
Right.
And I know so much about this game world and what you do in it that I wish I didn't.
Right.
That would have been so much more satisfying to find out just by playing it.
Yeah, when we put up a video that was like our, quote unquote review, or my review of the game, and literally the entire point of the video is we showed not much gameplay at all, but was like, look, the best way to have played this game was to have gotten a press copy before anyone was talking about it, 2 weeks before, because the process of figuring out what this game is the best part of the game.
Right.
Because it's just bamboozling.
Figuring out what Death Stranding means.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I do feel sorry for everyone who, especially folks who really, like, there were some reviews, like IGN's review I think was really well edited and stuff, but man, it was like so much about premise and about what these specific mechanics were, which I guess is why people read reviews or watch reviews. But I just thought, oh god, if you watched that, or if you watched a Let's Play or something, or a streamer, what would be the point at that stage?
Yeah,
You're just like go deliver some mail.
Normally,
I thought you were going to say Norman.
Me too.
Norman Reedus.
I thought the same thing.
Normal
Reedus.
Norman Lee.
I would never refer to Norman Reedus. Like the vast majority of games, the premise is not a spoiler.
Yeah.
And so like the standard review template kind of betrays you in that case.
Yeah. It betrays. Did you have reviews of like Glittermitten Grove then? What happened there?
So I did have a few. They were kind of middling. The best one was on Rock Paper Shotgun, where it was very kayfabe. It was very much like it was kind of like a dismissal of the frame game of the fairy city building game. But then if you found the secret link to get to the rest of the review,
oh, you're kidding. That's really good.
But then the problem with that is like I'd seen people on Twitter like years later saying, "Oh yeah, I was going to play that, but then Rock Paper Shotgun took a crap on it."
Jesus.
But that's it's such a shame that like this art project you've made. And by the way, if people are listening, we're not going to get into it. So if you like go Google Frog Fractions if you want to play this game and go
play the first one.
Yeah.
And if you really liked that, or if you really like ZZT,
right,
if you know what that is, play the second one.
Yeah, go for I guess just search for Glittermitten Grove on Steam is probably the best way.
Yeah.
And figuring it out. But yeah, it's the most beautiful. Like I get so much joy thinking about Frog Fractions 1 and 2 because it's such a nightmare for you. It's like but that's what makes it. Not that I get joy from that being the case, but it's such a wonderful like, I don't know, celebration of the artist that like to do it the proper way you have to like fall on your sword or something like.
Yeah.
And there would have been other people, and like I feel like if I was in your situation, I might have taken the coward's way out or done it in a. But I.
Well, and the kind of miraculous thing is we went to Adult Swim Games for funding, right, and managed to get them to agree to also to this ridiculous non-promotional plan. Like, and it's, I can't believe they went for it.
I feel like if anyone was going to,
yeah.
Well, sure.
Like I'm sure Activision probably wouldn't have maybe.
Right.
Yeah, you want to do what?
Maybe Adult Swim and like Devolver or someone, or maybe
Right,
Annapurna are around now, right?
Right,
so,
right.
But yeah, I wonder, like, do you feel like in a way you sort of opened the door to that sort of? I do feel like, for me personally anyway, as somebody who wasn't necessarily in that space playing experimental games like that during that time, I think it did sort of open my, I don't know, wallet to that type of experience, you know, or get me to play games like that were not games that I was. We so often we play games that we're looking forward to. I guess I was looking forward to it in a way because I played Frog Fractions 1, but like playing games that are weird and experimental and stuff. Do you feel like there's more of that stuff now than there was when the first?
I do, but I don't know if I had anything to do with it. Like I think there's just more games now,
right?
And there are more people kind of realizing that they're not going to have a commercial hit, so really swing for the fences in terms of what they really want to make.
Do folks tend to do that stuff, do you think, for their own artistic purposes, or is there an element of like resume building with that as well?
That's hard to say. Like certainly if you're trying to get a job in games, having a good portfolio piece is a good way to do that, but I'm not sure that a game that like the interviewer can't just like look at and get is the way to do it.
Like a link to a math frog game,
right?
They mightn't. I don't know. Maybe have you gotten work off the back of those games?
I mean, arguably, the Kickstarter was.
Yeah, I get. Yeah,
was that
you had thousands of employers in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have actually did interview a couple of years ago at a couple of AAA places, and the interviewer was always like a fan of my work,
right?
But I really got the sense that since I had mostly worked alone, that they were afraid I wouldn't fit onto the team, and I'm not sure how to deal with that. It's like, well, I guess I could work on like an open source game, like as part of a bigger team as a team. I don't know how to solve that.
Yeah. That's the you don't have experience in something quandary, which is
right. And I guess the other half of it is like, well, you can't give a junior programmer position to the Frog Fractions guy, but he's like, we can't give him a senior position because we don't know if he'll be able to do anyway.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird. The other story I have about interacting with AAA is that when we were eating lunch at GDC and holding that big Frog Fractions 2 sign that we put over like different indie mega booths, someone, I think it was the Fallout New Vegas team, came up to me,
Obsidian,
and told me that they made the entire team play Frog Fractions before they started on this game.
The Outer Worlds?
New Vegas.
Oh, New Vegas.
I think it was.
That's amazing.
That's what I remember it being anyway, yeah. And I always love hearing stories like that because you so rarely get a definite sense of like where your influence goes.
Right.
Like I can play a bunch of games and say like, this feels like it was inspired by Frog Fractions, but like you look at things like Candy Box. Nope, the guy'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
Like that's entirely that person's own psyche going wild.
Right. What type of games are you playing at the moment then? What are stuff?
Right now I'm playing Disco Elysium.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Which is, I didn't really, and again, this is a similar thing to Death Stranding. I went in not knowing what to expect. I'm like 5 hours in. I still kind of don't know what it is. It's kind of like an adventure game with a gamified conversation system where like instead of just the traditional dialogue, like a Monkey Island game with a dialogue tree, if there were a bunch of stat checks in the dialogue tree, and then also like your brain interjects like with here's like a note about what the person just said,
right?
Or like here's like your insight into it, or here's something you might say, and then that option comes up in the dialogue. And so like the vast majority of the game seems to take place in these conversations, and
with like an inner monologue playing,
with an inner monologue like interspersed into it, into the dialogue, and the writing is really like astonishingly good.
Yeah,
like I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed by it.
It's awesome that like within the same week we had like a sort of a CRPG in Disco Elysium, and then the first-person RPG du jour at the moment, the Outer Worlds. I will get that correct. Which you completed?
Yeah, I played a bunch of it. In fact, what you're getting at, I really want to play Disco Elysium, and I feel like it's sort of a natural follow-up from the way I played Outer Worlds, because like my favorite thing about Outer Worlds was I went the first time I'd seen it was when we did the extra live stream, and you played it a little bit at 2 a.m. or whatever, which was kind of.
You just went home that day and bought it. Almost?
I bought it the next day.
That's amazing.
But it was fun because I totally blacked myself out on what the game was, and so I had a general sense that it was Fallout-y, and I'd seen like the original reveal trailer. But I had so much fun just trying to find the boundaries of that world, and in a sense, it kind of screwed me over because I finished it and was like, oh, that was a bit smaller than I expected it to be, which is one of the only things I had heard. But the whole fun of it was just being like pushing my way into social situations with new skills and being like, what is this game and what's it going to let me do? And I feel like Disco Elysium sounds right up my alley because it's taking that like that social, like finding the boundaries of how you can affect social situations, and like maybe struggling to find those blurry edges, kind of the whole experience. Yeah, like I really like games that continue to defy my expectation once I feel like I've got an idea on the systems at play.
How long did it take you?
Probably like. It was over the course of 3 days. It was more than 20, less than 30 hours.
Cool.
Yeah. So
you know what? As maybe Jim, you can feel the same way. As a new parent, I feel like that is right in my wheelhouse. Right? That's about as long as I want to go.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm much more into the like under 5 hours games these days.
Yeah, don't play Death Stranding then.
Okay.
Or at least for a little while. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. Is there anything you can sort of highlight that you're working on at the moment? Or?
So this probably isn't what you're looking for if you're listening to this podcast looking for Frog Fractions 3, but I'm working on a podcast called Topic Lords. We've got 3 episodes out right now. It is basically me talking to my friends about things we think are interesting. Like the premise of the show is we all like put topics into the topic bucket.
Okay.
And then we pull a topic out and discuss it until there's a lull in the conversation. Then we just do that again And the guy goes for like an hour.
This feels like adult conversations.
Yeah, well, yes, and
but interesting ones.
Well, the entire poll would be like, if you want to hear me talk more,
right?
What
type of topics? Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Topics that we have. Well, let me just pull this up. All right, so topics that we did in episode 2, the YouTube ad that was an entire movie. Are you getting enough sleep? If so, how? Recurring dreams and my recurring nightmare about looking at something that ends all levels of reality. What compels horses to climb stairs? And how much work would it take to insert a completely fictional person into the historical record?
If you want to know about all of those and more, check out Topic Lords.
TopicLords.com.
Perfect. Jim, thank you so much for coming on.
I never used that marketing voice in the podcast itself.
That's why you're on this whirlwind podcasting tour. Right. We'd love to have you back on again. It's great to be in the same area as you. We love your work, and it's awesome to have you here. Jeremy, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing this week with the extra live stream and editing, and it's great to be in here, right? It's great to be actually sitting down here doing work.
It's good to be home.
Yeah, it feels real good. And thank you, Lou, for listening, for checking out this podcast, and for being a patron to all of our folks who have helped us buy so much affordable Swedish furniture solutions for this studio, as well as extra podcast mics and cans of LaCroix for our guests, which Jim is. What's your rating of our LaCroix? It wasn't very cold.
I mean, this LaCroix is like it's I would give it a C. I would give it like
it's a video game review. We need it out of 10, man. We need
7 out of 10.
7? Okay.
Yeah.
Strong. Okay. Is that an IGN 7 or a GameSpot 7?
I don't know them well enough to say.
Okay, cool. Sorry, it's a recurring joke. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Patreon.com/Noclip if you want to support our work and get access to bonus podcasts as well on an external feed. We'll be back next week. We have another developer coming on to talk to us about their game. Cornelia Geppert, the creator of Sea of Solitude, over at Joe May, will be coming over. She's on the way from Germany to talk to us about that game. You can pick it up on PC and Xbox, I believe. But yeah, until then, we will see you, I guess, on the YouTube and on the Twitter first and all that sort of stuff. Have a good one. We'll talk to you next time.
Smell you later.